Good afternoon and welcome to this week's edition of Keeping an Eye on the Geopolitical Ball. This is my weekly video in which I, Jamie Shea, Senior Fellow at Friends of Europe, look at some of the issues which are going to be on the European security agenda in the weeks to come. But we Europeans are used to living on a relatively prosperous and politically secure and free continent, but we've been for many years now surrounded by a belt of unstable states to the south and to the east. This was true before the COVID-19 crisis, and it's going to be even more true afterwards. Take, for instance, the situation in Afghanistan, where the United States is now rapidly withdrawing its forces, even though the peace agreement that the United States signed with the Taliban back in March has not been implemented. There's no ceasefire, the Taliban are stepping up their attacks, and there is a danger that the international presence would have disappeared long before any kind of reconciliation process is set in. The risk then is that the Taliban break their promise not to welcome foreign jihadists back to their territory. ISIS, of course, is already well implanted in Afghanistan, and the country goes back to the base of terrorist training camps, projecting instability outwards that was its characteristic before 9/11. Take also, for instance, the situation in Libya, where again, hopes for a ceasefire, for an arms embargo, for a political process have broken down. The leader of the forces in the east, General Haftar, has just a few days ago announced that he is breaking the agreement of 2015, brokered by the United Nations to move the country forward. Libya is much closer to Europe than Afghanistan. And again, those instabilities could be a source of migrants, of trafficking, and many great power interferences, particularly by Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, the Saudis, the Russians, and many others. Iran is back on the agenda as well. The oil price has collapsed, forcing the regime against the wall, and tensions with the United States, particularly over maritime shipping in the Gulf, has been rising. In October, the United Nations restraints on Iran regarding its development of ballistic missiles will also run out. And finally, I'm keeping an eye this week on the Sahel, on Mali, and the Central African Republic, Burkina Faso, where the French have been engaged for many years in trying to fight jihadism, but where we all agree, even before COVID-19, that there has been a stalemate. These four cases all indicate that, number one, the United States is not going to be as involved as in the past, maybe with the exception of Iran, and the EU is going to have to do more to defend itself and to stabilize these regions. Number two, it's going to have a mix of military and diplomatic instruments to do this. And number three, it's going to have to learn to work more constructively with some difficult partners, but who have a lot of influence in these areas. There is Turkey. There is Russia, there is Iran, of course, China, an increasing factor, and finally also the United States. So when COVID is over, these issues will not go away, and they will be one of the first big tests for the new geopolitical European Union that people here in Brussels are hoping to see come to pass. Just last week, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, published its annual report on global defense spending. There were some very interesting findings this year. Number one was that defense spending last year reached a staggering amount of $1.5 trillion. And this represented a 3.6% increase in global arms spending vis-a-vis 2018, which means that 2.2% of all of the GDP in the world now goes on defense, which is about $250 for every inhabitant on this planet. Now, as you would expect in this SIPRI report, there were indications that the United States is spending more, over 5%, China is spending more, again over 5%, and many other countries in the world are now in the top league, such as the Saudis or India. But what was perhaps less to be expected was that the Europeans have also been spending a lot more on defense lately, again, over 5%. And Germany's increase was 10%, one of the highest, which is very good news for President Trump, who, as we all know, has been pushing the Germans for many years now to meet their target of 2% of GDP on defense for the NATO alliance. So for those Europeans who had been advocating a much stronger role of Europe in security and defense. This was good news that after the big downfall, the decrease after the financial crisis, a corner had been turned. But of course, the question now is what impact will COVID-19 have on defense spending, and will the economic shocks caused by the virus now make this trend line go sharply down again? There are some who hope that COVID will have shown the utility of armed forces, particularly in building hospitals, carrying out tests and transporting patients across frontiers. Could we have handled COVID without our armed forces? But there will be others who fear that in the wake of COVID, there'll be much more focus on the environment, on social issues, on welfare spending, and defense will be the victim of all of this, leaving Europe less able to deal with those geopolitical crises in its neighborhood, which I described a moment ago. Which way will the cookie crumble on defense spending? This is a topic which I will return to in greater depth in next week's video. Thank you.